Hello, and welcome to Better Money with the MAIAs, where we speak to the latest winners of the Money Awareness and Inclusion Awards to find out how they're helping other people to become better with money and perhaps learn some useful tips for ourselves too. With 2/3 of the world's population unable to answer very basic questions about money and finance becoming more complex all the time, we need as much help as we can get. I'm Michael Gilmore, co-founder of the MAIAs, and that's exactly why we started the awards. In this episode, we get to meet Stephanie Fitzgerald of the Money charity, winner of the new UK MAIA Award for their project working with underserved communities. Hello, and welcome to Better Money with the MAIAs, the show where we interview and chat to the winners of the Money Awareness and Inclusion Awards from the last year. And I'm very, very happy to have with us today Stephanie Fitzgerald from the Money charity, which won an award this year for working with underserved communities, which is obviously a very, very special category in the MAIAs. And before I let her tell us about what they do, I want to do something first, which is congratulate you, Stephanie, for winning, because it's one of the reasons we do this is just to make sure that we can say thank you and congratulations to the winners, and thank you for entering, and thank you for all the work you do. So with that started, why don't tell us about the Money charity, what it is you do, and specifically the work that you entered, which was with people with learning problems, learning issues, and how that came about.
Sure, yeah. So we're the UK's financial capability charity. We work with everyone. So we work with young people from the age of 7, and then we work all the way up, through school, college, university, to adulthood as well. So we work with for employers, for people in the workplace, and also in the community. Excuse me. And we feel that that's really important. So financial capability should be a lifelong journey. And so, it's not job done as a young person. It's not you just start once you're an adult and suddenly teach someone everything they need to know. It's something that should be a learning process, just like most other things that, are seen as important in life. And the kind of main way we do that on the ground is that we deliver financial education through our money workshops, and we do them face to face and virtually. Sorry, I've got a real frog in my throat. Oh, excuse me. I'll drink of water. So we deliver face-to-face and virtual workshops across the UK to young people and adults. That's kind of how this project came about. Our activity-based workshop that we developed for young people and adults with learning disabilities and learning difficulties, because we really found that there was a gap there. And that most organisations weren't offering something for those groups of people. And so what we were doing, the demand seemed to be increasing. So we were getting more and more requests from charities that work with people with learning disabilities, special schools that work with young people with special educational needs. And we were kind of botching it. We didn't want to say no. So we were, trying to tailor our existing content for those groups, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't work so well.
Yeah.
And the more we kind of looked into it, the more passionate we got about, oh my goodness, there really is a need for this. Because what we were finding when we were talking to teachers at special schools and practitioners at charities that work with people with learning disabilities was that they just find it really difficult to get any sort of outside speaker in, because the answer was always, oh no, we're not experts in working with people like that. And I think understandably there is a kind of fear around that. You don't want to go in and do a bad job. You don't want to send someone in, who might be an expert in money or anything else, but isn't equipped to deal with, different learning disabilities. But, the problem with that is that you have this huge group in society that aren't getting those outside experts coming in to talk about not just money, but a whole range of things. So yeah, the more we looked into it, the more we're like, yeah, we've got to do this. And I think the thing that, yeah, that's probably the thing that I'm sort of most proud of about the program, was that we didn't sort of shy away from that, and we were
Yeah.
actually sort of turned on its head, and rather than trying to become experts in working with people with special educational needs, we were just upfront about the fact that we're not, and we're clear that we're bringing the money expertise. We developed flexible, really tailorable content. We developed with users who have lived
Mm.
experience, so people with learning disabilities, as well as teachers and practitioners who are experts at working with them. And we kind of describe it as we co-deliver with those people. So we
Right.
bring the money expertise, and they're the people that know their young people or their users the best. And so we co-deliver together rather than trying to be experts in both. And that's worked really well. And just the fact that we're experts who are willing to come in and talk about anything and bring a bit of the real world
Yeah.
to them is something that has gone down really well, and we've people have been really grateful for, let alone the fact that we're talking about money, which is something that there's been so much excitement and interest in. And the interesting thing for us, so my kind of the bread and butter of what I do day to day, is running our programs mostly in schools across the country, and we reach over 30,000 young people a year. We've reached over 300,000 since 2010. um, uh, but it actually can be quite challenging to get into schools. It's
Yeah.
often more of a battle than I think most people would think, even though we are offering it for free, because
Yeah.
there's just not much time on the curriculum. And we could do a whole other podcast about that and the issues there. But the thing that we found is partly why this program works well and there's such an appetite for it, is because special schools and other types of charities that work with people with learning disabilities have more time for these kind of life
Yeah.
skills. And one of the things that's really lovely is that we'll kind of go into a special school, talk about budgeting, and all those sorts of money, personality, and those sorts of spending decisions and those sorts of things, and they'll say, oh great, yeah, tomorrow we're taking all the young people out on the bus and they're going to have some money, and we're going to go to the supermarket and we're going to do some really practical learning as well,
Yeah.
which is just not something that in the mainstream the time is given for, because there's so much focus on exams
Yeah.
and all those things.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah. And so that one of the things that's amazing, the way you're doing that. One of the things I'm thinking through as I hear that is, you sort of co-deliver these classes with the experts in teaching people with these needs. The adaptations you've had to make, are there more adaptations in terms of, let's say, style of teaching, or there are more adaptations in terms of required outcomes? Because I assume that there are differences in required outcomes and differences in needs from that community, as well as the needs in terms of the style of teaching. It's probably a stupid question, but it just, which of those has been more, or which have you had to adapt to more?
Yeah, as you'd expect, a bit of both. The biggest adaptation has been just around making it flexible, because we're really conscious we didn't want to make any assumptions, because learning disabilities can look completely different
Yeah.
um, in terms of ability, learning style, concentration. You could have people who are actually very quite advanced in terms of questions and knowledge
Yeah.
around financial education, but it's more the kind of learning styles. And if you're autistic, for example, or have ADHD, there's the kind of learning styles challenges versus
Mm-hmm.
the other side, where it does need to be made more kind of simplified a bit more, and concepts need to be really kind of made quite simple for people with different kind of learning disabilities. So that was the big challenge, really, was that we're creating this program that needs to somehow fit all of these people. And sometimes it might be that you get one group of people who are very similar, or it might be like in a special school where there's the whole range of different learning
Yeah.
disabilities in one room. So how we um yeah, what we developed was it's kind of more like a toolkit of different activities that our consultant kind of, who they're the freelancers we use to deliver our workshops,
Hmm.
have that upfront conversation with the teacher or that practitioner about those different activities and what will work well, and then can also think on their feet and kind of bring out different activities from their bag of tricks on the day if things, something's going, not quite how they thought it would, which is different to our normal mainstream content, which is more like a workshop, with lots of writing on the board and kind of fast pace going through teaching as well
Yeah.
as activity.
And in terms of outcomes, and I'm asking about the outcomes because I was having a chat. But one of our other winners this year was uh, Financial Literacy Australia, who also work with people with learning disabilities and all forms of disabilities. And they were telling us that one of the reasons they got into it was actually a large number of people with those needs end up being scammed, possibly because they're not verbal. And one particular case was just has no concept of money. £5, £5,000, same amount of money, just money, right? So and those issues, came to the fore and sort of led to that. Are those things as well that are kind of outcomes you think through with this group? Are there different ones from? I mean, those are still outcomes for other groups as well, right? But
Yeah.
anything particular for that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what we found too. And so there is more of a focus on scams and financial abuse with
Yeah,
these groups than other groups we work with. Because, yeah, like you say, there's those sort of more of a potential vulnerability there.
yeah,
So we have some nice activities like different cards with all different types of scam. Like you get a text message saying this, you get a call saying that, and determining what's a scam and what's not a scam, which always brings up some really good conversation. And financial abuse obviously is a bit more nuanced and a bit more
yeah,
tricky to kind of get across, but you can
yeah.
have some really good, nice conversations and role play around that, which is what we do.
Yeah, that sounds very valuable. It's also something, as mentioned. So one of our other winners this year was not doing the same thing, but doing something similar in Australia. Some group. To me, it was a new area when we had I think a runner-up from Spain working in this space last year or the year before. But is it? I mean, is it something you're seeing as a growing space within the UK, but also globally? I mean, is this something you see around the world? Other people talking about similar things?
In terms of scams and financial abuse,
No,
or
yeah, obviously scams and financial abuse. Yeah, that's obviously the hot subject at the moment. Um, I mean, we're working with people with special needs, whether physically or other forms of, yeah, those kinds of needs.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly because of actually the increase in scams and financial abuse and things like, yeah, it's just we're all, I think, becoming a bit more aware of those sorts of vulnerable people who
Mm,
maybe were harder to reach before, are
mm,
using lots of tech and things just like the rest of us, and are therefore potentially more vulnerable to things, which just makes uh, the whole money conversation and covering money a bit higher up on the list of like special schools and people that work with those sorts of
yeah,
people, um, which
yeah.
then opens up a sort of wider conversation about other aspects of financial education, which is positive.
Yeah, no, very good. I'd like to go back a little bit. You said that you've been doing this since, or the Money Charity's been doing this since 2010. Was that the beginning of the Money Charity? How did the Money Charity start? I mean, I love the directness of that name. I mean, you can't beat that, right?
Yeah, do what we say on the tin. So
Yeah,
it was actually our 30th birthday last year, and we were called Credit Action before. So yeah, we Credit Action started 30 years ago. Actually started as more of a debt advice charity, and
right.
then gradually moved into the financial capability, financial education space because of just noticing that there's quite a lot of work being done in helping people once they're in trouble. There's not much being done in terms of sort of preventing,
Yeah.
people getting into financial problems in the first place. So yeah, it kind of gradually moved into that space, then became, just more like a pure financial capability charity. And yeah, we had our name change when our current CEO joined 12-ish years ago. So yeah, that's our history. And yeah, we there's actually not much going on in the UK in terms of charities like us that focus on financial education only and work with not just one specific group. And I think the conversation is really kind of moving on here, and it's quite an exciting time actually with the curriculum review happening,
Yeah.
the financial inclusion committee, which Michelle, our CEO, is on. That kind of conversation about it needs to be this lifelong journey, and it's not just about teaching kids something when they're 16 and they're about to, go off into work and then leaving them, and the fact that it's yeah, like a lifelong journey as you change and
Yeah.
financial services landscape changes, and everything else.
Yeah. I do feel we have to get it in. I do agree. I think it was. I actually, honestly, I first heard the phrase "it's not one and done." I think from Chantal Clark, who you must know at
Mm-hmm.
FT Flick, and I was like, "Yes, that is so." So, however, you do need to, if we can, at schools, give people the terminology, the ideas that they will need to come back to later, and then come back to them, and then come back to them, and then come back to them. But yeah, if we can get them in early enough in schools, and they can learn, so they know it's coming. It's coming at some point, right? You are, just these things. Because I do feel that we all in life come fresh to these things. It's like, oh God, what's a mortgage? How do I get one? What's a good one? What's a bad one? How would I know? I haven't done this before. It's that kind of thing. With speaking of which, I would love to also just shift tack a little bit, because I love finding out people who work in financial education. I often feel have had some moment when they decided to do this. And it's often because, like everyone, has no idea about money, and all of a sudden goes, "Oh, I get it now. This is how this works. This isn't." So, did you have one of those? Is that like? Did you have a moment when you said, "Oh, I get this"? And what was it? And how did that happen?
Um, Not really, because I'm actually quite unique in that I'm sort of a financial education lifer. So I've done my whole career. I started um, when I was 23, my
Oh,
first sort
wow.
of proper job. Um, in financial education, and I sort of fell into it, but it does sort of bring together lots of passions. And when I saw that job, that sort of entry level job that I first
Mm-hmm.
started doing as an education officer, I thought this is perfect, because I um, faced quite a lot of challenges as a young person. So I had leukemia when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. I had a lot to do with different charities. And I think just really gained sort of, the ability to empathize with different struggles that different people have
Yeah.
earlier on than maybe a lot of people do. And so I wanted to do something, important and linked to charities and things. And then I also had a passion for education. I thought a lot about teaching. I thought that's what the route I was gonna go down to. And then I also had a really good financial education from home. So my dad is really passionate about it, talked a lot about it, talked about, um, stocks and shares and that kind of thing from a young age, but also was taught really about the sort of radical actually decisions that you can make about your spending, whether you have a lot or not very much. So I kind of had this slightly eccentric childhood of like going to stay a night in a 5-star hotel, but we'd eat baked beans in cold baked beans out of the tin in the bed, just that kind of like that kind of lesson that like you can
Yeah.
make choices, like if you really want to get, and not everyone can, but in our
Yeah.
situation we really wanted to stay in that nice hotel, but there are other ways we can save money to
Yeah.
help towards that. So when I saw that job back when I was 23, I thought, oh, this brings together a lot of a lot of things for me, and I've been able to bring that together even more in my career, like developing content for Teenage Cancer Trust, where we
Yeah.
developed content for young people going through cancer treatment, because they face quite unique challenges in
Yes.
terms of the costs of cancer and, being ill for a long time, receiving benefits and grants and kind of
Yeah.
knowing how to look after that, and also missing financial education because you're not in school or,
Yeah.
college or whatever. So yeah, I'm really happy with where I've ended up. And one of the things that I often say when I am in schools or, talking to young people is, this is the one thing that I can think of that will definitely impact all of your lives that you'll
Mm.
learn
Yeah.
about. Whether you have lots of money or not very much, or what happens to you, how you manage it will affect you
Yeah. Yeah.
massively, which is, yeah, what keeps me passionate.
No, I bet it does. I bet it's, and I love the story about your dad. I remember having conversations years ago with people about, some people think that, and they're right. The best place to teach money is in the home. But the problem with that is that you need parents who are financially literate, as your dad clearly was. And how do we make that happen? Essentially, we have to start somewhere. But I was saying to someone once, it was like, almost, everyone who is financially literate is teaching their kids. Because essentially, to me, that's like almost the definition of a financially literate parent, is someone who's teaching their kids about money. Because if you're not, what are you doing? Right? It's so, and yeah, the story of the 5-star and baked beans. Yeah, but that is what that's a very good story, because that does show the breadth of choices. There are options, there are choices, and everything is a choice. And once you're taught that, I think you get to see a wider world, right? That's fascinating. That's very, very good. Um, on a similar note, my next question. So when you teach kids, and I think it's good, you sort of, well, when you teach anyone, whoever you're teaching, you see, I think we all see people get that moment themselves and they go, oh, I get this now. Have any stood out to you, the like particular parts of your curriculum where you see, okay, I start to understand this. This is the bit where I start to understand money. Because when I was teaching like face to face, I would know when people are getting it and not getting it. There's the blank look, and and then the yeah. Um, how does that? I mean, you said that you have freelancers going to classes, but I'm sure you still do classes and you still see how it works, right? How it lands. What are some of the things that you think have really helped things stick?
Yeah, I think the first one that springs to mind is a budgeting activity. So we have a few different types, but basically where you're given a set amount of money and some
Yeah,
choices about how you're going to spend it. And we, like to use things like fake money with the young people and that sort of thing that makes it more sort of tangible and fun.
yeah,
And we get them in groups to make those decisions, which is, a big part of the learning actually, is kind of like most people in life aren't making financial decisions completely on their own, and being able
yeah,
to communicate about it and maybe have a sort of some disagreements about it, and
yeah,
being able to compromise and justify your why you want to spend it in a certain way is an important part of it. But yeah, that is so often a light bulb moment for young people. And the most common thing they say after it is they have this sort of slightly guilty look on their face and they say, oh, I appreciate my mum and dad a bit more now, or like, oh, I understand how hard it is for my mum now. And they look a bit almost panicked, like, because I get it. I remember from being a child, you
yeah,
just sort of think they have this infinite amount of money often, if you're
yeah.
lucky enough to have grown up like that. And quite small amounts of money can sound like quite a lot, can't they?
Yes,
Um, so yeah, just having that simulated experience of actually I had £250 for my week or whatever it is that we give them, and that sounded like a lot of money, but it's so quickly gone on all those things that are, important but maybe not exciting. They do look genuinely a bit scared, and you can imagine all the things they've been asking for, and now they're thinking, "Oops, sorry, mum and dad."
but that's perfect, right? Because then you've reached them. And that is half the challenge, when isn't it, when we do teach money, is this taking it from abstract theory into, no, this is your life.
Yeah. And it's the thing I find most fun about, the content creation, that challenge of like how can we bring the real world into the classroom in this like short amount of time with limited resources, blah 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 blah. But yeah, that is definitely where those light bulb moments happen. And there are some other fun activities we do, like around insurance, which I love, where the group have to make different choices around insurance, and then we throw different scenarios at them, like your house is flooded or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you get these sort of raised, I told you we should have got that insurance. We've got nothing now. I don't want to live with you anymore. And it's like, it's all pretend, but it gets so real in the moment with teenagers in that example.
That sounds fun. I'd love to come into a class of that. That sounds really, but exactly, it is. You need that level of realism, and I think it's so. But you just need to be shown once that bad things can happen to you for you to realize that insurance is necessary, right? And only certain types of insurance, because other types are not necessary for everyone, right? So that
Yeah.
what are the any other examples? Because I love this, and I hope this is what people watch this for, is because you're on the ground, you're at the coalface doing these and developing these ideas. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's because it's about getting people to feel it, because often young people, they and adults, we know the right answer. We know we should save,
yeah,
we know we should budget if we don't know what budgeting is. That concept is actually quite simple, that you should make sure you know where your money's going and think about it through and that kind of thing. But that it is the kind of getting them to feel it and experience it when it goes
yeah,
wrong or when it goes right and you feel in control. That I think is the kind of key to that behavior change and putting into practice what you what kind of makes sense. So yeah, another way that we do that is a saving activity. So we get young people to do some simple maths where they think of something that they buy regularly that's usually quite small. So it might be a burger and chips a couple of times a week on the way home from school,
yeah,
or makeup with
yeah,
girls. It often is now, which I'm
yeah,
always a bit shocked at how much more they spend on makeup than I do. um that kind of thing. And we just get them to do the simple maths of, okay, if you spend that once a week or twice a week or once a month, whatever it is, here's the maths, work out
yeah,
over a month, over a year, over 2 years, how much that is. And then you just see that light bulb moment. Often it's in the thousands, and
yeah,
then we take it a step further. Think about and write down on your piece of paper what you could spend that money on. What else you would want to spend that money on. And um, yeah, that's just kind of a nice way of making them see in a tailored way as well, that's actually linked to what they're literally doing and spending, how they could make different choices, and other things could be available to them, that's also not in a kind of preachy way, because that's obviously the other thing that's really important, that it wouldn't be impactful if I stood in front of a classroom and said, what do you spend your money on? Well, that adds up to thousands. You shouldn't. What a waste of money.
yeah,
No one
yeah.
wants to hear that, do they? So taking them through the process, letting them sit there and do it, and those cogs go round while they're adding it up, and the numbers getting higher and higher, is much more impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, they'll and you hit the nail on the head, right? If they feel it, if it's an emotion, right? Because money is the numeracy required in money is so tiny, so simple, and yet the emotions are so complicated. It's what makes it the big challenge, right, is to reach people emotionally. I always wondered, because the dinner we went to, Bobby Seagull was there, which was like very exciting for my daughter, who was also there. She asked him to join her pub quiz, which I thought was a genius idea. I mean, while he's there, right?
Good for
Um,
her.
yeah, he hasn't replied apparently, but one day, Bobby. I was thinking, yeah, it's great to have him as an ambassador for financial literacy, and I think he's working with some groups. But he must look at the maths needed to do money and think, well, that's not really maths. That's just adding up. I mean, the stuff that he does is way beyond. But unfortunately, people do think that there's it's maths and I'm bad at maths, therefore I can't do it. But it's actually not. It's emotions. It's understanding. It's psychology, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that we're quite clear about what we're actually trying to achieve. Most people we reach, it's not for a long time, we're not seeing them for weeks, for hours at a time. It's fairly light touch. And so, for example, with the activity-based program that we won the award for, of course, there are learning outcomes from that about scams and fraud and that kind of thing
Mm.
that are important. But the kind of overall thing, the thing we care most about is that someone leaves our workshops feeling positive about money and not feeling like it's this scary thing. And
Yeah.
because especially when you're talking about young people, it is fairly unlikely that they're going to remember the ins and outs of what you've taught them about how a mortgage works or whatever,
Yeah.
in 5 or 10 years when they actually need it. But hopefully, what they will remember is, oh, I learned about that and I got it. And it wasn't scary and it was quite fun thinking about what kind of home I might want or how I might want to budget.
Yeah.
Or it was quite simple when they explained what a bank account was or whatever. It's again that feeling, and not feeling like it's this overwhelming, complicated maths thing that I'm just going to ignore and
Yeah.
not engage with. Um, uh, which yeah, we're really trying to create in our workshops and in any interaction we have with people.
Yeah. No, very good. One of the things that we hope we can do with this is help other people working on this subject, do better work. And and obviously you're doing really well. I'm saying up for something bad here, because I'm bad. But you're doing really well. You've won an award, but you must have made mistakes on the way there. And sometimes that's how we all learn best, right? So, do you think was there a mistake that stands out that you fixed and you thought this would be useful for other people to learn from, maybe?
Um, Yeah, I think so. With this particular program, it's quite specific, but it was just about those different audiences. So
Yeah.
the and those different kind of institutions you're going into. So the kind of co-delivery and co-creation thing works really well with charities
Mm.
because they we're generally going to reach kind of like one group and there's just more time to liaise and that kind of thing. But then it's just never one size fits all, is it? So then with special schools, that was different because often we're being booked to deliver multiple workshops with different classes with different makeups of
Yeah.
young people. We've got different teachers maybe in the classroom for each one who maybe don't know what's going on, and so that was like a big learning that, oh, these we've got these two different settings where we just can't have that same depth of conversation in a special school. We don't know what teacher's going to turn up in the classroom. And so yeah, it just we had to kind of build in a lot more talking up front, and also actually just accept that, I think, that this isn't going to be perfect in all settings. It has to be a bit less tailored to that group in special schools,
Yeah.
but we still want to do it. We still think it's a value, and schools in general are a bit more kind of, chaotic. You have to think on your feet kind of environments, and we just have to be good at dealing with that.
Yeah. And I wonder, the fact that you've had to be, I don't know whether you sort of stripped back, but obviously the accessibility of going into these special schools, the accessibility of the way you're teaching has to be so much stronger. So, it has to be more accessible to these groups. Have you taken anything you've done from that and put it into the other curriculum and said, look, actually, we could teach this in, there's a really good, this could work. Has anything gone that way?
Yeah, it's been a really good test actually, because then exactly like you say, we simplified it, and then you think, oh well, do we need to go in the detail that we go into in the mainstream stuff? And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of sums up in a way, I think, quite a big challenge of delivering financial education in general, is that thing of kind of like, in some ways, I think when you're writing content, the less you know, the better, because the more you know, the more you're kind of like, oh, but then we need to talk about
Yeah.
this scenario and that scenario, and so yeah, that process has helped with that because it's made us take a step back and reflect on, do we need to go into that level of detail for our other stuff then if we don't think we need to?
Yeah.
And we found a really simple, succinct way of explaining, these different concepts in our activity-based program.
Yeah, I wondered if that was the case because, the more, as you said, the more detail you load into money, into the concept, you can still lose people at the end of the class. You don't just necessarily lose them at the beginning, right? And so the simpler and the more confident people become with it psychologically. Yeah, that's very interesting. I've got one more question. It's sort of a two-parter, and it's about money tips. Normally people would say, what should I do with my money? People come around all the time, but for us, we actually ask it in a slightly different way. If someone comes to you and says, "Look, how should I think about my money?" What would you say to them if they're just like a person in the street or a friend or whoever? But the second part is if someone comes to you, because we hope the people listening to this are people who want to teach about money and help other people learn about money. So how would you talk to them? What would be your tip for them as well, just to help them teach people about money?
Yeah, so first part, I think um, it's just really helpful to think about money as a kind of everyday part of your life rather than this chore that you need to do. And I'm sort of talking about that from personal experience, especially when you do a job like this, you're so conscious that you need to practice what you preach. And sometimes it makes me, I think, less likely to go and, look at my budget or review insurance providers or whatever, because I just, always
Yeah.
seem to put it to the bottom of my list. So the kind of best tip I had a long time ago, which I do now, is to have a money date, which kind of makes it a positive thing as well, where, every fortnight or whatever it might be, sit down by yourself or with your partner or whoever with a glass of wine and just review things and have that time set aside so that,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen where before, 6 months has gone by and,
Yeah.
you haven't reviewed things. And yeah, that kind of links with that whole positive thing as well. Like it does
Yes.
feel like a positive thing when we do that, and call it a date somehow makes it feel, like less of a chore, and makes it into more of a conversation about that feels positive about, what are the things we want to achieve and how can we use money to get there, rather than, let's sit down and look at how badly
Yeah.
things are going and how much we've overspent, and just that
Yeah.
slightly more positive approach. Um, which I guess links as well to what I would say to people who, do this kind of work, is just, yeah, like we were talking about just now, just really focusing on that kind of positivity and empowerment and thinking about emphasis on choices, although I know that that's hard depending on who you're working
Yeah.
with and cost of living crisis and all that kind of thing. But that is kind of how you, I think, the key to how you get people engaged and wanting to talk about money, which is ultimately, what we all want to achieve.
Yeah. And that's the starting point, right? Is to make people comfortable to talk about it. And then, because it's not, once people are comfortable talking about it, it's not really that hard, right?
Yeah, and it's often quite hard to stop people. We do find that like in our adult workshops as well, it's actually once people are like, oh, I'm doing it, I'm talking about money, and it's like liberating, and and oh, other people have similar challenges to me, is yeah, something that people really can't stop once they start.
That's brilliant. That's very, very good. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and to give us those ideas about how you're working at Money Charity and working with these different groups. And before I leave, I'm going to do it one more time. Say congratulations for winning the MAIA for this year. And thank you for
Thank
taking part, and thank you for such amazing work.
thank you. I feel like I really did not do the pauses thing. Lodge did not say anything short, I don't think. So sorry to your colleague for that.
Don't worry about that. Hold on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Better Money with the MAIAs. If you found it useful and would like to learn more from other winners of the MAIA Awards, please subscribe to this podcast wherever is easiest for you. You can also visit our website, which is maiawards.org, or follow the Money Awareness and Inclusion Awards on LinkedIn and other social media. Thank you, and we hope you'll join us again soon.